The first time the sky screamed, 3 empires shut down their trade routes. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't a weapon. It was a sound. Low. Ancient. Broken. For 300 years, the desert planet Virex 9 echoed with that same roar every night at precisely 2:17 orbital standard. Ships passing through the sector reported the same phenomenon. Sensors spiked, hulls vibrated, and then, silence. The galaxy labeled it a hazard. A monster world. A cursed orbit. They were wrong. It wasn't a curse. It was thirst. Virex 9 had once been an ocean planet. Geological archives showed coral megacities, floating continents, atmosphere rich with moisture. Then came the stellar flare, an anomaly so violent it stripped the oceans into vapor in a single planetary cycle. The seas boiled away. The rain never returned. Everything died. Everything except one thing. At the center of the largest dried ocean basin lay a shape so massive early probes mistook it for a mountain range. Sapphire scales, each the size of a dropship. Wings like shattered cathedral windows folded against its sides. Horns arcing backward like crescent moons. An ancient dragon. It had been there when the oceans vanished. And it never left. Exploration fleets tried scanning it. Its biosignature was off the charts. Energy emissions fluctuated unpredictably. When the first military cruiser approached within attack range, the dragon lifted its head and roared. The shockwave disabled every system on the ship without firing a single weapon. No one attacked again. Instead, they rerouted around the sector and added a warning to every navigation map. Virex 9, do not engage. But here's what the reports didn't include. The dragon never moved from the basin. It never hunted. It never flew. It simply lay there, ribs expanding slowly, eyes half-closed against the relentless sun. And every night, it cried. Not a roar of dominance. Not a threat. A cry that trembled at the edges. A sound like something enormous breaking very, very slowly. 3 centuries passed. Civilizations rose and fell. Borders shifted. But the crying never stopped. Then, on a routine supply run between Terran frontier colonies, the civilian transport Astra Dawn suffered a reactor cascade failure. The captain had seconds to choose a crash site. Every safe coordinate was too far. There was only one planet within glide distance. Virex 9. The crew protested. The dragon. The hazard rating. The legend. But dying in space was certain. The monster world was a chance. The Astra Dawn entered atmosphere trailing fire. Emergency pods deployed across the salt flats like falling stars. The impact shook the desert for miles. When the dust settled, survivors gathered around the wreckage. Communications were offline. Long-range transmitters fried. Supplies limited. And somewhere in the distance, the dragon roared. Several colonists dropped to their knees. It knows we're here. It's coming. It waited 300 years for prey. But 11-year-old Elena Ward didn't hear hunger in that sound. She heard something else. She had grown up in Earth's drought belts, where water ration sirens echoed through empty reservoirs. Where cracked ground swallowed crops. Where people spoke in hushed voices about rain like it was a myth. She knew the sound of something dying slowly. That night, as the twin moons rose over the salt plains, the dragon's cry rolled across the horizon again. The adults reinforced the perimeter. Power cells were rationed. Weapons were checked. Predator-class megafauna, the colony medic muttered. If it moves toward us, we run. Elena stood at the edge of camp, staring into the darkness. The cry came again. Closer this time. And beneath its power, beneath the vibration and the ancient resonance, she heard it clearly. Not rage. Not warning. Pain. The desert wind shifted. For a moment, clouds of salt dust parted on the horizon. And she saw it. A silhouette vast enough to block starlight. Its head lifted slowly toward the sky, as if asking something from the universe itself. The sound that followed was weaker. Almost hoarse. Elena swallowed. Why doesn't it leave? She whispered. No one answered. Because everyone else was too busy being afraid. The dragon lowered its head back to the basin floor. And the night went silent. Except for the soft crackle of cooling ship metal. And the distant, almost fragile sound of something ancient struggling to breathe. Elena looked down at the emergency water canteen clipped to her belt. 1 ration. Enough for 1 person for 2 days. Her fingers tightened around it. Behind her, the colony leaders argued about evacuation plans that didn't exist. Above her, the stars burned indifferent and cold. And somewhere in the dark, the dragon waited. For something it had been begging the sky for 300 years. No one noticed when Elena left the perimeter. They were too busy arguing about survival projections. Radiation exposure. Salvage priority. Signal flares. No one calculated the probability of an 11-year-old girl walking straight toward a dragon. The night air over Virex 9 was colder than expected. Desert heat collapsed fast once the sun dipped below the horizon. The salt flats shimmered silver under twin moons, stretching endlessly toward the dried ocean basin. And from that basin, the dragon breathed. Each exhale rolled across the plains like distant thunder. Not violent. Not explosive. Heavy. Strained. Elena stepped carefully over fractured salt crust, boots crunching softly. She clutched the emergency canteen to her chest as if it were something fragile and sacred. Behind her, the colony lights flickered weakly. Ahead of her, the silhouette shifted. The dragon's head rested against the ground, wings folded tight like broken sails. Even at a distance, its size distorted perspective. Ridges along its spine rose and fell slowly, unevenly. Every survival instinct she had whispered, "Turn back." But she kept walking. She remembered her grandmother during the great drought on Earth, how she'd rationed water with trembling hands. How she'd once poured the last glass for a neighbor instead of herself. "You never ignore thirst," her grandmother had said. "It changes people." The dragon inhaled sharply. The ground trembled. Somewhere behind Elena, alarms began to blare. They'd realized she was gone. Thermal scans from the crashed ship picked up her heat signature moving across the flats. "Get her back," someone shouted through a cracked comm line. Too late. The dragon's eye opened. It was enormous. Not glowing red like the stories said. Not blazing with fire. It was dull. Clouded at the edges. And focused entirely on her. Elena stopped walking. For one suspended second, the universe held its breath. Orbital satellites from distant civilizations, still monitoring Virex 9 out of scientific curiosity, recorded the moment. Energy signatures spiked. Magnetic flux shifted. Gravitational readings fluctuated slightly. Across light years, observers leaned closer to their screens. The dragon lifted its head. Sand cascaded from its scales in glittering avalanches. Its neck rose higher, higher, until it towered above her like a living mountain. Elena felt very small. But she did not run. "Hi," she whispered, though her voice barely carried. The dragon's nostrils flared. Hot air washed over her, dry and sharp like air from a furnace. Its jaw parted slightly. Rows of ancient teeth, each longer than her arm, glinted under moonlight. Back at the colony, someone screamed. "This is it." But the dragon did not strike. Instead, it lowered its head. Slowly. Deliberately. The massive skull descended until its snout hovered just above the cracked salt. Its eye remained fixed on her. Not predator to prey. Not ruler to subject. Something else. Something tired. Elena stepped forward again. Every footstep echoed in her ears. She could see the fine fractures in its scales now, tiny cracks spidering across sapphire plates that had once shone like polished gemstone. It wasn't just thirsty. It was deteriorating. She unscrewed the canteen lid. The sound was impossibly loud in the silence. Metal against metal. Click. The dragon's eye flickered. Elena swallowed. "It's not much," she said, voice shaking. "But, it's what I have." She extended her arm. The canteen looked absurdly small against the immensity before her. For a moment, nothing happened. Wind whispered across the flats. The dragon's breath rattled in its chest. Then, carefully, with precision that defied its size, the dragon lowered its head further. Its tongue emerged slightly, dark, massive, yet moving with delicate control. The tip touched the lip of the canteen. Elena almost dropped it from the heat. Then the dragon tilted its head just enough for gravity to help. Water poured. A thin stream. Gone within seconds. But the instant it touched the dragon's tongue, the air changed. The ground beneath her feet vibrated, not violently, but like something deep within the planet had shifted position after centuries of strain. The dragon inhaled sharply. Not a roar. A gasp. The dullness in its eye sharpened, just slightly. A faint pulse of blue light rippled beneath its scales. Across orbit, monitoring ships exploded with alerts. Core energy fluctuation stabilized by 0.03%. Atmospheric ion levels adjusted. Tectonic drift slowed measurably. "What did she just do?" a distant observer whispered. Back on the salt flats, Elena lowered the empty canteen. "That's all," she said softly. The dragon's head remained lowered. Its eye blinked once. Twice. And then, for the first time in 300 years, it did not roar. Instead, it exhaled. And the sound carried not desperation, but relief. Far above them, thin wisps of vapor began to gather in the night sky. Not enough for rain. Not yet. But enough for something impossible to begin. The dragon shifted slightly, adjusting its massive body as if rediscovering how to move without pain. And then, it looked directly at Elena. Not over her. Not past her. At her. Recognition settled in its gaze. Not of prey. Not of threat. But of the one who answered. The colony watched in stunned silence. Across the galaxy, sensors recorded a miracle no one understood. And beneath twin moons on a dead ocean floor, an ancient dragon realized it was no longer alone. The first fleet arrived 12 minutes after the water touched the dragon's tongue. They didn't come out of concern. They came out of fear. Hyperspace ruptured above Virex 9 in a cascade of violent blue light. Warships from 3 different civilizations dropped into orbit without coordination, without diplomacy. Because every long-range monitoring station had just recorded the same anomaly. The dragon's energy output stabilized. For the first time in 300 years. Down on the salt basin, Elena didn't see the fleets. She only saw the dragon breathing differently. Not ragged. Not strained. Balanced. The faint blue pulse beneath its cracked scales intensified, spreading like light through stained glass. Fractures along its hide didn't vanish, but they stopped worsening. The dragon shifted its weight. The movement sent tremors across miles of desert. Back at the colony wreckage, emergency sirens blared. Orbital channels filled with overlapping transmissions. Planetary core output has decreased by 2.7%. Impossible. That fluctuation has been constant for centuries. Gravitational stress readings are leveling. Leveling? Up in orbit, one of the oldest scientific vessels present, an Andori research cruiser that had studied Virex 9 for decades, ran a deeper scan. Then ran it again. And again. Because the data made no sense. The dragon wasn't just a life form. It was a regulator. 300 years ago, when the stellar flare stripped Virex 9's oceans into vapor, the planet's thermal equilibrium collapsed. Without water to distribute heat, the core destabilized. Tectonic plates began grinding unpredictably. The mantle overheated. Virex 9 should have cracked apart within decades. It didn't. Because the dragon stayed. Its species, ancient beyond recorded galactic history, wasn't merely biological. They were planetary anchors. They absorbed excess stellar radiation. Converted thermal overflow into bioenergetic reserves. Bled it off slowly to prevent catastrophic rupture. For 3 centuries, this dragon had been doing the work of an ocean. Alone. The roars that echoed nightly through space? Not aggression. Energy venting. Controlled releases to prevent core detonation. Each cry was it burning itself alive to keep the planet intact. And dehydration, on a creature whose biology relied on fluid conduction to regulate that energy, was killing it slowly. The water Elena offered wasn't symbolic. It restored conductive stability. Barely. But enough. On the salt flats, the dragon lifted its head higher than before. Not towering. Steady. Its eyes were clearer now, deep sapphire rather than clouded glass. Elena felt something brush the edges of her thoughts. Not words. Pressure. Emotion. A presence vast and ancient, like standing at the edge of a deep ocean and realizing it is aware of you. Images flickered in her mind. Water worlds. Floating continents. Dragons gliding through monsoon skies. Then, firestorms. Drying seas. The dragon alone in a basin that once shimmered blue. Holding. Enduring. Waiting. Elena staggered slightly as the impressions faded. You were helping, she whispered. The dragon blinked once. Above them, fleet commanders fell silent as the Andori cruiser broadcast its findings. This entity is functioning as a planetary stabilizer. That's not possible. It has maintained mantle pressure equilibrium for approximately 302 standard years. Why? The answer was obvious in hindsight. Because no one else would. Civilizations had marked Virex 9 as lost. Unprofitable. Hazardous. They rerouted. They avoided. They studied from a distance. No one asked why the dragon never left. Because if it had, the planet would have shattered. The dragon inhaled deeply. This time, the sound wasn't strained. Energy flowed differently through its body, measured, no longer desperate. For the first time in centuries, it wasn't burning reserves faster than they could replenish. High above, atmospheric models began updating in real time. Ionization levels dropped. Magnetosphere fluctuations smoothed. Moisture particles, trace remnants lingering in the upper atmosphere for centuries, began condensing microscopically. A fleet admiral whispered, "This world may actually recover." On the ground, Elena felt the temperature shift slightly. Subtle. But real. A breeze moved across the flats, cooler than before. The dragon lowered its massive head until one sapphire eye aligned level with her. This close, she could see herself reflected in it. Small. Fragile. Alive. A low vibration rolled from its chest, not a roar. Not a vent. Something softer. Gratitude. The word formed in her mind without sound. Not in language. In feeling. 3 centuries of isolation pressed into that single moment. 3 centuries of being misunderstood as a monster. All because it stayed. Elena swallowed. "I didn't know," she said quietly. The dragon's eye narrowed gently. It hadn't expected her to. Across orbit, the fleets held position. Weapons systems powered down, one by one. The Andori cruiser issued a formal advisory. "Cease all hostile contingency planning. The entity is not aggressive. It is exhausted." Silence followed. For 300 years, the galaxy had feared a beast guarding a dead world. Now they understood. It wasn't guarding it. It was saving it. And it had nearly died doing so. On the basin floor, the dragon shifted slightly, stretching one immense wing. The motion sent a ripple of blue light along its frame. Above, clouds, thin, fragile, almost shy, began gathering where no clouds had formed in centuries. Elena looked up. "Is it going to rain?" she whispered. The dragon didn't answer with words. But for the first time, it didn't sound like it was begging the sky anymore. It sounded like it might finally rest. The dragon should have left. That's what the fleets expected. Now that its systems were stabilizing, now that the immediate planetary crisis had eased, logic dictated one thing. It would depart. Ancient apex entities did not remain near lesser species. Especially not fragile, oxygen-dependent mammals with improvised shelters made from wreckage. But it didn't move away. It moved closer. The shift was slow, deliberate, as if testing strength long unused. One colossal wing unfolded. Dust and salt cascaded in silver waves from its membranes. The span blocked out both moons. Air currents spiraled outward, knocking Elena off her feet. Back at the colony perimeter, several adults shouted in panic. "Get her out of there." But Elena didn't run. She pushed herself upright, brushing salt from her palms. The dragon lowered its head again, not in surrender this time. In inspection. Its eye, vast and impossibly deep, studied her as if recalibrating every assumption it had held for centuries. Elena felt it again, that pressure in her mind. Stronger now. Clearer. Images surged, sharper than before. The dragon soaring through storm systems. Wings cutting through cyclones. Water bending around its body as it dove through ancient oceans. Then the flare. Blinding light. Boiling seas. Evaporation in seconds. The dragon alone in a collapsing ecosystem, making a choice. Stay. It could have left. Dragons were capable of void travel, ancient records confirmed that much. They rode stellar winds the way ships rode hyperspace. It had chosen not to. Because leaving would have meant extinction for everything left beneath it. For 300 years, it endured dehydration, internal energy fractures, structural decay, all to keep tectonic plates aligned and core pressure regulated. No recognition. No gratitude. Just fear. And now, a small human had walked across a dead sea and offered water without hesitation. The dragon's enormous forehead lowered until it touched the ground in front of Elena. The impact trembled through miles of crust. Colony sensors spiked. Neural resonance fields flared around the contact point. In orbit, scientists leaned forward. "This is new," one whispered. Elena hesitated only a second. Then she stepped forward. Her hand was tiny against the dragon's scale. The surface wasn't burning hot like before. It was warm. Steady. She pressed her palm gently against it. The moment skin met scale. The world shifted. Not physically. Perceptually. Elena gasped as something vast and ancient opened fully to her awareness. Not overwhelming. Inviting. The dragon wasn't projecting dominance. It was offering connection. And something within human neurology, adaptive, empathetic, strangely resilient, synchronized. Orbiting ships registered a harmonic frequency between dragon bioenergy and the human neural field. Impossible. Unprecedented. Beautiful. The dragon's breathing deepened. For the first time in centuries, it was not venting energy outward in desperation. It was cycling it properly. Moisture levels in the upper atmosphere rose measurably. Microscopic droplets condensed along thermal gradients. Elena felt a cool sensation brush her cheek. She looked up. A single drop of water fell from the forming clouds. Then another. Not rain. Not yet. But promise. Back at the colony, silence replaced panic. Even the most hardened survivors felt it. The air was different. Less brittle. Less hopeless. The dragon lifted its head slightly, careful not to break contact too abruptly. And for the first time since the stellar flare, color returned. Deep sapphire bled across fractured scales like ink spreading through water. The cracks didn't vanish. They became seams of glowing blue light, strength instead of weakness. Across orbit, fleets powered down weapons entirely. No one spoke. They were witnessing something that defied every military doctrine written about apex entities. This wasn't submission. This wasn't domestication. This was trust. Elena felt a final impression flow through her thoughts. Not words. Not exactly. But if it could be translated, it would be this. You stayed. She blinked, confused. I just brought water. The dragon's eye narrowed slightly, almost amused. No. You stayed. For 300 years, countless ships had come and gone. They scanned. They labeled. They left. She walked toward. The distinction mattered. The dragon slowly rose to its full height. Not in intimidation. In renewal. Its wings extended completely now, stretching miles across the basin. Wind rolled outward in concentric waves. Above, the forming cloud layer thickened. Electrical charge crackled softly through gathering vapor. For the first time in 3 centuries, the sky did not feel empty. It felt responsive. Elena stepped back slightly as the dragon's wings beat once. Just once. The motion didn't lift it. It stirred the atmosphere. Cloud systems rotated. Pressure gradients aligned. Moisture gathered. Orbiting scientists stared at their displays in disbelief. This world is entering a sustainable climate correction phase. It shouldn't be possible. It is now. The dragon lowered its gaze to Elena one final time before shifting toward the center of the basin. It wasn't leaving. It was reclaiming its role, not as a dying anchor, but as a stabilizing force no longer alone. And above Virex 9, thunder rolled. Soft. Distant. But real. The galaxy had feared a monster. Instead, it had misunderstood a guardian. And now that guardian had chosen not isolation, but bond. The rain did not begin gently. It began with silence. The dragon stood at the heart of the dead ocean basin, wings spread wide against a sky no longer empty. Energy pulsed along the seams of its restored scales, not in agony, but in balance. Above Virex 9, 3 fleets remained motionless. No weapons charged. No attack formations. Only observation. Because for the first time in 3 centuries, atmospheric models were no longer predicting collapse. They were predicting recovery. The first lightning bolt split the sky without violence, white and clean, branching across thickening clouds. Elena stood at the basin's edge, small against immensity, her empty canteen still in her hand. A cool wind swept across the salt flats. Not dry. Not burning. Cool. Then, a drop struck the cracked earth. Another hit Elena's cheek. Another struck the dragon's snout and rolled down its scales like liquid silver. And then the sky broke. Rain fell in sheets across Virex 9. Not a drizzle. Not a symbolic mist. A storm. Salt plains hissed as centuries of desiccation met water again. Steam rose in ghostly spirals. The cracked ground darkened as moisture seeped deep into forgotten layers. The dragon lifted its head, not to roar. To breathe. Deeply. Fully. Water ran along its wings, filling the fractures, flowing across sapphire plates that gleamed brighter with every passing second. The blue glow beneath its scales stabilized into a steady pulse. Planetary core readings dropped into safe parameters. Tectonic strain normalized. Magnetosphere fluctuations flattened. Across orbit, stunned silence filled command decks. One Andori scientist whispered, "The planet is entering full hydrological restart." Another voice followed quietly, almost reverently. It would have died without it. Not the storm. The dragon. It would have died. And taken the planet with it. For 300 years, the galaxy had called it a monster. For 300 years, no one had asked why it stayed. Elena stepped forward into the rain. Her hair clung to her face. Her boots sank slightly into softening ground. The dragon lowered its massive head toward her one last time. Not in surrender. Not in need. In acknowledgement. A single tear gathered at the corner of its immense eye, brighter than the rain, glowing faintly like liquid starlight. It fell. When it struck the ground before her, the impact did not shatter earth. It bloomed. Water surged upward in a clear fountain, spiraling briefly before settling into a perfect, self-sustaining well. Fresh. Pure. Permanent. Elena stared at it in awe. The dragon's voice touched her mind one final time, strong now, steady. Not gratitude. Partnership. Across orbit, fleet leaders received a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. Emergency session initiated. Immediate species reassessment required. Data streamed across chamber walls light years away. Human miner approached extinction class entity without hostility. Entity stabilized after human interaction. Planetary restoration initiated. No coercion. No weapon deployment. No domination. One counselor said what the others were thinking. They did not conquer it. Another corrected softly. They helped it. Silence followed. Then the official reclassification was issued. Terran species status update. Previous designation, adaptive mid-tier deathworlders. Revised designation. Strategic empathy species. Do not mistake emotional intelligence for weakness. Do not interpret restraint as limitation. Do not ignore a species that runs toward what others fear. Back on Virex 9, the storm softened into steady rainfall. The dragon straightened to its full height, magnificent now, no longer gaunt. Wings expanded across the horizon, no longer torn, but radiant under lightning-lit skies. It looked once more at the human girl who had crossed a Dead Sea for it. Not because she understood planetary thermodynamics. Not because she knew ancient biology. But because she recognized thirst. The dragon beat its wings once. Twice. On the third beat, it rose. Not fleeing. Not abandoning. Ascending into cloud cover, where its energy signature intertwined with the reforming climate system. It would remain. But not alone. Below, the colony stepped out from shelter. No one cheered. No one shouted. They simply stood in rain that hadn't touched this world in 3 centuries. Elena knelt beside the glowing well and dipped her hand into cool, clean water. Behind her, a colony engineer whispered. All that, from one canteen. Elena shook her head softly. No, she said. From listening. High above, fleet commanders withdrew without ceremony. No victory declarations. No warnings. Only respect. And across the galaxy, a doctrine was quietly amended. Never equate fear with understanding. Never abandon what you do not comprehend. And never underestimate a human child carrying water. Rain continued through the night. And for the first time in 300 years, the sky did not echo with a cry. It answered one.